Hey, what's going on, everyone? And I am back again today for the next part in my Overlord, the Sacred Kingdom cut content series. Yes, I know I've been on a bit of a break. I usually tend to take breaks from content creation towards the end of the year, but I hope to get this one out before the holidays, and happy holidays to all of my beautiful, beautiful viewers. Thank you for tuning in once again. There's one thing I have to say. In the interim period here where I've taken this break, I watched an anime that has totally blown my mind. It's called Gankatsuo, or The Count of Monte Cristo, and I plan to make a video talking about this anime because it just completely has taken over my life. Not only did I watch the anime, I read the book it's based off of as well. It's from like 2005 or 6. It's from like the late to mid 2000s. It was such a wild anime. I was like completely enamored with it, and I've been like enamored with the story of The Count of Monte Cristo, the real story, since then. This is just something I wanted to nerd out for a second about. But anyway, on to why we are all here, and that is today to continue on with Overlord, the Sacred Kingdom cut content. So today we are going to be wrapping up the final parts of the Volume 12 content and finally getting into the big boy of Volume 13. So I have to say this is going to be a little bit weird on what I'm going to cover exactly. So I'm going to start the video with the ending parts of Volume 12, but then we get into Volume 13, and Volume 13 jumps right into action. Like, one of the first scenes of Volume 13 is a very long action scene that we see in the movie as well. Volume 13 is going to be a little hard to cover because of the amount of pages that there is, and also like how to best divide up the content, I guess, is going to be. I'm really going to kind of play that by ear. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into part 3 of the Sacred Kingdom cut content. So picking up where we left off, this was right after Ainz defeated the mighty King Buser in that city. And the next scene in the movie, after Ainz defeats the mighty king, it jumps to him discovering the orcs and the whole scene talking with the orcs. In the light novel before that, there's a small scene where Ainz and Neia are investigating the HQ. Ainz and Neia stumble upon a room where a lot of, it looked like a torture room from the way it was described in the light novel, and there's a document on the table, and Ainz actually uses his monocle, the monocle that translates documents. He's used it several times in the anime. This document details experiments that were done on humans in the city by demons, and they actually find a room with victims of these experiments. They don't go into the specifics of like what exactly the experiments were, but we do get detailed of like people that are like kind of cut up and stuff. Like, it's very, very gruesome. They cut that entirely from the anime, but that scene basically showed you that the demons, not the Demihumans, they kind of had their own agenda going on. Then we get to the meeting with the orcs, and that meeting is mostly the same. We get a little more background information on the orcs in the light novel. That's really the only main difference. You know, we learned that the orcs are like one of the very few tribes of demihumans that like completely refused to work with Demiurge Yaldabaoth. And we also learn a little bit about their culture and how orcs are actually, contrary to popular belief, they are a species that very heavily emphasizes cleanliness, which is kind of, I guess, a counterintuitive to their appearance, which is of pigs. And also they explain like a little bit more of their culture, like how their standards of beauty are like completely different from humans, and like people that humans consider beautiful are considered hideous by orc standards. It's kind of like their beauty standards are like the complete inverse of humans in the new world. So we get a little more information on like just them as a species, but for the most part that scene is the same, with Ainz basically recruiting them, and that becomes a thing later on. And then the next scene in the movie is meeting Caspond, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about what's going on during these scenes because it's all from Neia's point of view, and it's a lot of her inner dialogue that we're getting. As has been the case with Neia, basically the entire volume, she is just constantly admiring Ainz. Noticeably, at this part of the light novel, the admiration is getting even more intense. Like, she is just constantly ranting about how great Ainz is. It hasn't gotten to like a fanatical point yet. Her respect for him is now like almost overshadowing all the other feelings she has like in her life. life. So then we have the meeting with Caspond, and where Ainz and Caspond meet. We see this in the movie as well. Caspond is Calca's older brother. He actually passed up on the throne, and that's why Calca was able to inherit. But because of his existence, that kind of created a political controversy in the Holy Kingdom, because normally the throne is supposed to go to a man. Agnatic primogeniture, I believe, is that an inherent structure that from like actual real life, and that kind of caused a lot of the political turmoil that Calca was dealing with prior to this invasion. So Caspond is a pretty important political figure. He's like, I believe, the only living member of the royal family left. Remedios is like kind of determined that Calca's still alive. We haven't confirmed Calca's death, but a lot of other people in the country, you know, are basically going off the assumption that Calca is dead. So he's a very important figure. And so when we have that meeting with Ainz, you know, that is basically he's basically the de facto head of the Robo Holy Kingdom, meeting with Ainz there. And actually during this meeting with Ainz, that this is something that's is kind of a note that comes up later, but it's very early foreshadowed here in this conversation in the light novel. They removed this from the movie, but Ainz asks several times to several different people throughout this whole conversation if anyone can see through illusion. While you're reading it during this section of the light novel, you're wondering why he's asking about that. You know, like, because this is all from Neia's point of view. He basically makes up some kind of an excuse of like, oh, I've heard demons can mask their appearances and like they could like infiltrate us or something like that. Him asking those questions is important because of a scene that happens after the meeting with Caspond that was cut out of the movie. I'm gonna come back to Remedios and Gustav meeting with Caspond, but I want to talk about this first. After the scene with Caspond, Remedios, and Gustav, we cut to a scene where Ainz is alone. It's from Ainz's point of view. One of the few times in this volume that's like a significant section is from Ainz's point of view. And Ainz is basically chilling in his room, and then a doppelganger, who we know can shapeshift, comes into the room and reports to Ainz. And what's interesting is at this point in the light novel, we don't get any description as to what this doppelganger looks like. It's just, Ainz just refers to him as the doppelganger, and the doppelganger says, oh, I apologize for what I said before, and Ainz is like, oh, it's okay, it's part of the plan, don't worry about it. We don't know who this doppelganger is, but we know it's someone that has been interacting with Ainz in the Robo Holy Kingdom, and that's why Ainz was asking so much on who can see through illusions. Can any of you guys see through illusions? Is because there is a doppelganger amongst people, like there. And so that was kind of an interesting tie-in to like Neia's point of view, hearing Ainz say something, and we make mental notes of it, and then it comes back later in a later scene. That was very interesting. If you've seen the movie, you already know about the reveal of that, so this shouldn't be a surprise, but I'm gonna save that talking about more in depth of that until we get to when it's actually revealed who the doppelganger is. But like, it's interesting because like in the movie, the doppelganger's presence isn't even revealed until the very, very end of the movie, whereas in the light novels, there's already been breadcrumbs dropped here that there is a doppelganger that is serving Ainz in this group of people. And speaking of interesting things, now going back to the meeting between Caspond, Gustav, and Remedios, this was after Ainz left. And one of the most interesting things that was omitted from the anime was during this scene where they're talking about strategies for the upcoming fight, they discuss the types of demihumans that make up the demihuman army, breaking down the species and subspecies of demihumans in the demihuman army. It's super interesting. I'm going to give a very brief description of all the species that they mentioned in volume 12. So they start off by saying that there's 12 large tribes, and by large they mean in terms of numbers. So we have snake men, who I don't think require any explanation. They're anthropomorphic snakes. We have armats, which are bipedal rat people, which is a nightmare for people like me that don't like rats. Armats are said to be a relative of Quagua, which we see in the Volume 11 stuff. And also snake men, like the Armats, are relatives of lizard men, which is another demihuman race that we've already seen previously. So basically, there are relatives of the demihuman races that we focused on previously in the Overlord story that are in this army, which I just thought that was an interesting tie-in there. Then we have the Caven, which are basically apes, and they're large apes though, and they're larger than humans, and they also don't have eyes. And then we have the Zarin, who become major players in the later part of Volume 13, and they are basically eel demi-humans, and a lot of people actually thought that they're called grotesques, so heteromorphs in the Yggdrasil terms, but no, they're actually demi-humans, but a lot of people thought that they were heteromorphs like at the beginning. And then we have bladers, which are insect demi-humans that have blades coming out of their hands or something like that. A nightmare fuel for any insectophobes out there. And like the Zarin, people thought that they were grotesque, but they're classified as demi-humans because spells that target demi-humans affect bladers. So that's why they're classified as demi-humans despite their very, very heteromorphic appearance. Then we have Horerunners, which are, they have horse legs, but I don't think they're centaurs, because centaurs are classified differently. They have 2 legs, but those 2 legs are horse legs, so they can just run really far. They're known for their sprinting capabilities and their endurance, but so I don't think it's like a centaur who has 4, like basically the entire lower half of their body is a horse. It's just that they have 2 legs that are horse legs. That's what I believe that they're called. And then we have the Spidon, who are spider demi-humans, and they have 4 arms, and they can make thread. You know, so basically we have Spider-Man up in here. Spider-Man is canon in Overlord. Okay, and then we have Stone Eaters, and their appearance isn't actually described, but they're called Stone Eaters because they eat rocks and they can spit them, and they're almost like bullets. Like they can dent armor with how strong they can spit rocks, and that's why they're called Stone Eaters, but their appearance actually isn't described, unlike the other demi-humans at this point. And then there's Orthruses, who are half carnivorous beasts. Then there's Magiroses, who, like the Stone Eaters, their appearance is not described really, but they're just magic wielding, and apparently the magic they can use shows up as tattoos on their body. And then there's Terrapuses, which I believe we see in the anime specifically as well, basically pterodactyl people, and they can fly to a limited extent. They're more gliding. And then we have the Boofolk, which we saw a considerable amount of in the previous part. And then there's even more detail because there's 6 other groups that aren't like very large. They tend to not live in large groups, but they're still categorized as different species. So we have ogres, which I don't believe need any explanation. We've seen ogres a lot. Then we have the Priam, which are similar to ogres in appearance, but they have the power to control earth. And then there's also the Va'am, which are basically Priam, but they have water powers instead of earth powers. Then we have Naga Rajas, which are different from Nagas. Apparently, though they are similar in appearance, they actually are completely different species, and they don't like each other. Then there's Spriggans, which once again, their appearance is not described, but they're described as having the ability to change their size at will, and there isn't a lot of evil ones. Apparently, they're more mischief makers than like bad. Like evil aligned Spriggans are considered very rare. And then we have the Zustia, which have the upper bodies of beastmen and the lower bodies of carnivorous beasts. And that details all the races in the demi-human army. Oh my gosh. It seemed like crazy the amount of time that they just took to explain this thing. And detail the races. It's amazing how complex the world can be, you know? And so after the meeting with Caspond and Remedios and Gustav, it then goes to that meeting with Ainz that I already explained. And in that meeting with Ainz, after the doppelganger shows up, the doppelganger then talks about Demiurge's plan and the plan and everything. And Ainz, of course, has no idea what the plan is. This is where we hear Ainz's inner dialogue about the plan and how frustrated he is at Demiurge, because Demiurge didn't give him a whole lot of instructions, because Demiurge was just kind of like, do what you believe is best, Lord Ainz, you know, because you can't make a wrong decision. And Ainz is, of course, freaking out internally, just like, oh my god, I wish I knew, I want detailed instructions here. The doppelganger shows up and asks Ainz in the next phase of the plan, who should be spared? Is there anyone that you want in particular that you want spared in the next phase of the plan? We also get a little inner dialogue about Ainz viewing Neia and like thinking about Neia. He says that he thinks Neia hates him because of Neia's eyes and like just because of how her face is and how intense her glare is, apparently, that he thinks that she hates him, when in truth it's the complete opposite, which I just think is hilarious. And so when Ainz is asked who should be spared, or is there anyone you want spared? He's so worried about giving the wrong answer here that he just immediately jumps to, oh, don't worry about it, you don't have to spare anyone. And that's the last line of volume 12 is, you know, all these events, all these things from Neia's point of view, thinking how great the Sorcerer King is, how wonderful he is, how merciful he is, and then we get this scene with, oh yeah, don't worry about it, you don't have to spare anyone. I do think that leaving that out of the movie was a good decision. I do kind of like how for the Overlord movie, if you hadn't seen any of Overlord before watching this movie, you would kind of view Ainz as like a savior. So like when you're watching the movie, you know, everything is from Neia's point of view. If you hadn't watched the previous part of the series, like you wouldn't know Ainz is in on this thing until way late into the movie. It comes as like a big reveal. So I don't criticize the removal of the Ainz point of view scenes because it kind of masks or misdirects the audience a little bit as to Ainz's actual involvement in what's going on. If you hadn't seen the previous part of the anime, which I found out that they did actually make this movie, they wanted to make it so people that hadn't seen the Overlord series could watch it, which I just find funny because it's so late into the story. Hey, to each their own, and it sounded like a lot of people actually were surprised at Ainz's involvement in like everything that happened with the Robo Holy Kingdom if they hadn't watched the Overlord series, which I think was a really nice change of pace for the movie. That wraps up volume 12. That completes volume 12, and then we go right into volume 13. So here's volume 13, guys, and volume 13, I believe at the time of its release, was the longest single volume of Overlord. Not counting like the, you know, post like content and all that stuff, it's like 370 pages, so it's almost 400 pages, which is considerably longer than a lot of the other volumes. Most of the volumes average around 300 pages. Really, most of them are more like between 250 and 300. So this one being like almost 400 is substantially longer than like pretty much all the other volumes preceding it. So I understand why they went through volume 12 so fast. I mean, guys, up to this point in the video, and also my past two videos, was all of volume 12. We are at like the 45 minute mark in the movie. So they got through this shit fast as fuck. I understand that because volume 13 is so big and massive and so much shit happens in this volume that giving the lion's share of the movie to volume 13, that makes sense. So I don't fault them for that decision. I do have to say though, that definitely shows in the quality difference, I believe, in the movie. As soon as we get into the 13 stuff is when I think the movie really found its footing. It really doesn't slow down at all. Like it's just bam, 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 events, and it's just all these good things happening one after another. So it's kind of weird because like when I was watching it, I didn't think the first third was bad, but retroactively, the last 2/3 of this movie, which is the volume 13 stuff, is so much better. It felt so much better than the first third. It makes me retroactively think the first third is bad comparatively. I feel like the runtime of the video is going on too much because of the end of volume 12 being so dramatic and specific and detailed and stuff. But I'm going to end this video by talking about some of the beginning setup of volume 13. Volume 13 opens up on a meeting between the leaders of the separate Demihuman tribes. So it's the Demihuman Coalition leadership meeting is what it takes place in the beginning scene of volume 13. And we see this scene exactly in the movie as well. I really liked seeing the designs of the Demihuman leadership for some of the leaders that we don't actually see pictures of in the light novel. The meeting between the Demihumans is relatively the same. What we get in the light novel is really more details on how the coalition really works. We get that vibe a little bit in the movie, but it's explained better. We get more context on how special these individuals are amongst their races and why they were chosen as the leaders of their species, of their tribes. They all have special abilities, or they all have some sort of special power amongst their species. Another thing that's detailed in the light novel is that a lot of the time, the Demihuman tribes, they're just fighting amongst each other. They don't band together and invade the Robo Holy Kingdom. Like, it's happened before, but not on this scale, because the Demihuman tribes, a lot of them hate each other, and they really don't get along. The only reason they're even able to operate as a coalition in the first place is because of how strong Demiurge is, and he's basically using the fear of him to unite them. We get a lot more of those inner tribe dynamics in the light novel, which I thought was interesting. And something that is cut out of the anime is that at the end of the meeting, they decide in order to make people more scared, more kind of psychologically torment the people that they're laying under siege. They have human prisoners, and several of the species that make up this army do eat humans. Some of them don't, but many of them do. And so they decide in order to affect morale of the defending army, they're going to take out human prisoners and just eat them alive in front of the city, like in full view of the city, which is insane.
That is delicious. Finally, some good fucking food.
I guess even in a movie format, we couldn't show that stuff. The next scene cuts to like a couple days later, and it's from Neia's point of view, and she mentions like how she can't get the image of people being eaten out of her mind. So in the light novel, they don't show it either. They don't like describe it, but like they say like what happened a little bit, and so it's insane. It's crazy. This war brutal tactics here. And the next scene takes us to the prep work before we get into the siege battle, the big battle scene of the movie. But I am going to save that for next time. Honestly, guys, I thought I could cover more in this video, but I guess there's the latter part of volume 12 is so detailed and so intricate, and there's a lot of little things to talk about that this ran on for much longer than I thought it would. I am probably going to go on break until the new year, so we will start the new year with a bang by covering the biggest battle scene in the entire movie, one which I loved. I really enjoyed it. I said that in my review of the movie. It was wonderful. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this cut content breakdown. I know there was a lot of, me just talking about the Demihuman army, but that's just how detailed Maruyama gets with this stuff. Like, there is no reason to know that. Like, it really doesn't come into the plot at all, but he just wants to build the world. He wants you to know how diverse this army is. He wants you to know their inner workings. You could just have a nameless, army of demi-human people, and that would work as a plot device. But he takes the effort to describe, like, the inner politics and the inner species makeup of the army for no reason other than just to build his world better. Also, I like comparing how the narrative flows in the light novel versus the movie based on the information that they chose to omit in the movie, which I do think actually had a narrative reason for those omissions as well, not just for time reason. It has kind of softened my opinion on, like, as watching this movie as a non-Overlord person, how your experience can be different than someone who has been a longtime fan of the series and knows what's going on. That's interesting. So guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below. I know I ranted quite a bit, so I do apologize for that. But did you learn anything? Are you as interested in this world building aspect as I am? What was your experience as if you were a non-Overlord fan watching this movie versus an Overlord fan? That vibe difference between the movie and the light novel? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, guys, if you want to see more Overlord the Sacred Kingdom cut content, please like the video to let me know. And if you aren't already, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out more than you know, and it'll let you know when I post in the future. With that being said, I want to thank you all for watching to the very end of the video, and I will see you all next time. Bye.